The concrete above my head was humming, and concrete is not supposed to hum. I felt it before I understood it. That low vibration came down through 40,000 seats and 8 levels of structural steel and settled into my teeth like the afternote of a struck bell. I was standing in the players' tunnel under the south stand, holding a radio that had just gone dead in my hand. And the match was still going on above me. I could hear it, the roar, the chanting, the stamp of feet in rhythm that makes the whole bowl flex like a living thing breathing. 61,000 people, and not one of them knew yet. Not one of them had any reason to. The score was level. There were 20 minutes left on the clock. And somewhere up there, a striker was probably arguing with a linesman over a throw-in, while the building beneath everyone's feet had started to do something I had no name for. My name is Gareth Hollis. I'd been head of stadium safety operations at Brenvale Park for 19 years, which means I'd spent 19 years learning every door, every vent, every choke point, every lie the building told about how strong it was. I knew which fire doors stuck in wet weather. I knew which stairwells funneled a crowd too fast and which ones too slow. I knew the building the way you know a body you've shared a bed with for a long time. The small sounds it makes settling at night. The places it's warm, and the places it's always cold no matter what the boiler does. And in 19 years, I had never once heard the public address system do what it had just done. The emergency broadcast had started. The real one. Not the match announcer reading out a car registration in the car park, not the pre-recorded safety message about not throwing objects onto the pitch. The override. The hard system that bypasses everything else, the one wired straight into the main board with its own priority and its own dead man logic. The one that's only ever supposed to fire, for bomb, for the absolute worst day. A voice I didn't recognize had come through it, clipped and flat, and said the words, "Do not exit through," and then nothing. Not a fade, not static, not the cough and hiss of a microphone being knocked. A clean cut, like a wire snipped with shears, mid-syllable. The kind of silence that doesn't happen by accident, because accidents are messy, and that silence was surgical. The lights in the tunnel flickered once and held. And then, very faintly, from somewhere deeper in the building than I had any reason to be listening, I heard the sound of every exit door in the lower concourse locking at the same time. 100 magnetic bolts dropping home in unison. Not a rattle. A single coordinated thud, felt as much as heard. The way you feel a heavy lorry pass on the road outside. A sound like one enormous breath being held by something far too large to have lungs. Before I take you any further down into that building, I want to say thank you to the people who keep coming back to these stories. And if this is your first time here, welcome. I'm genuinely glad you found us. If this kind of slow, grounded survival story is what you're after, stay with the channel and leave a comment when something gets under your skin. It honestly helps more than you'd think. Now let me take you back under the south stand, because the next thing I did was the thing I've gone over 10,000 times since. I keyed the dead radio anyway. Old habit, the kind that's older than thought. My thumb found the rubberized transmit button without my eyes leaving the dark mouth of the tunnel where it opened onto the lower concourse. Control, this is Hollis. Confirm that broadcast. Control, confirm. Nothing. Not even the hiss of an open channel. That soft sea sound of carrier static that tells you the link is alive, even when nobody's talking. The set wasn't broken. The little battery indicator glowed a steady, healthy green. The squelch was set right. It was that the entire network behind it had simply stopped existing. That's a very specific feeling. And if you've ever held a working tool that's suddenly connected to nothing, you'll know exactly what I mean. The device is fine. Your hands are fine. The button clicks. But the world the tool used to reach is gone. And you're holding a brick that remembers being useful. I lowered the radio slowly. My mouth had gone dry. I noticed that, in the clinical way, you notice small physical facts when the large facts are too big to hold yet. I should explain the building, because the building is the whole story. Everything that happened that night, every choice, every death, every cold piece of arithmetic, came out of the bones of the place itself. Brenvale Park is old. The outer bowl was poured in 1931, hand-mixed concrete and bent steel, built by men who'd come out of one war and didn't know they were building in the shadow of the next. Over the decades, they'd grafted modern stands onto that original frame the way you'd bolt new rooms onto a farmhouse, until the whole thing stopped making any architectural sense. A glass and steel cantilever here, a corporate tier there, new turnstiles, new wiring, new fire suppression layered over old, until the building was less a single structure than an argument between 8 generations of engineers, each of them certain they knew better than the last. Underneath all of it, beneath the pitch and the lower tiers, there's a service level most fans never even imagine exists. Plant rooms full of pumps and chillers that breathe day and night. The main electrical intake, where the city's power comes in fat and dangerous and gets tamed down into something the floodlights can drink. The water tanks, the deep storage, and the old air raid provisions from the war, never fully decommissioned because decommissioning costs money nobody wanted to spend. So the corridors had simply been welded shut at both ends and painted over and forgotten, the way you forget a relative you've put in a home. And running through all of it, threading the whole underside of the ground like a vein, a ring corridor we called the spine. It lets staff move from one side of the stadium to the other without ever surfacing into the crowd. On a match day with 60,000 people packed into the concourses, the spine was the only sane way to get anywhere fast. I knew the spine better than I knew my own street. That's not pride. It's just true. And it's the only reason I'm able to tell you any of this. I could have walked it blind, counting junctions by the change in the echo of my own footsteps. When the doors locked, I was alone, except for 3 other people within shouting distance. There was Priya Okafor, 26, one of my safety stewards, sharp and quiet, the kind who actually reads the procedure manual instead of pretending to have read it in the induction sign-off. She'd come down 2 minutes before the broadcast to swap out a dead torch battery from the supply cage. There was Davy Mullen, 53, our longest-serving maintenance engineer, a man who could fix anything with 2 parts and a great deal of swearing at the third. He'd been in the plant room corridor, chasing a noise on one of the chillers that had been bothering him all week. And there was a boy, a ball boy, maybe 14, in the club tracksuit, who'd come down to use the staff toilet because the public ones near the south stand were jammed solid with halftime cues that hadn't cleared. He had the slightly hunted look of a kid who knows he's somewhere he's technically not allowed to be. His name, I'd learned, was Sam. 4 of us, below ground, with the doors sealed and the crowd above us none the wiser, still singing, still pressing toward exits that had quietly become walls. "What was that?" Priya said, coming up the tunnel fast, her torch swinging. She'd heard the broadcast too, fed down here through the same speaker grills as everywhere else. Gareth. The override fired. The actual override. I've never heard it fire for real in 3 years. Neither have I. And I'd been there 19. It said, "Don't exit." Don't exit through what? Through where? It didn't finish. I don't know. And I want you to understand that the not knowing was the worst part of those first few minutes. Worse than almost anything that came after, because in that first stretch, I still believed there was a sensible answer waiting at the end of it. A gas leak in the kitchens. A bomb threat phoned into the box office. A structural alert, a crack in a support that the sensors had flagged. Something with a procedure stapled to it. Something I'd trained for, drilled for, walked stewards through on a wet Tuesday in February. I still believed I was standing inside a problem I could manage with the right checklist. I still believed in the checklist. Davy appeared from the plant room corridor, wiping his hands on a rag that was more grease than cloth. He moved the way he always moved, unhurried. But there was something off in his shoulders. "Power's fed, but the comms rack is dark," he said. "All of it. Telephony, the PA network, the data line to the police box, the lot." I had lights blink in the substation about 90 seconds ago. A proper voltage sag like something big switched over. And then the whole comms side just dropped. Clean, like someone pulled it on purpose from outside. "Pulled it," I repeated, "or it was pulled for us." He said it flatly, the way Davy said everything. But his eyes were doing something I'd never seen them do in 20 years of working alongside him. He was scared. And Davy didn't get scared. In 2 decades, I'd seen him get annoyed, get stubborn, get quietly satisfied when a stripped bolt finally turned. I'd never once seen him afraid. And seeing it now did more to frighten me than the broadcast had. The boy, Sam, was standing very still by the tunnel wall, with the flat of his hand pressed against the painted brick, like a man checking a horse's flank for a tremor. "It's gone quiet," he said. "What has?" "Up there. Listen." I listened. And he was right. And it was the second wrong thing in 5 minutes. The crowd noise had changed, not stopped. 61,000 people don't go silent. That's not physically possible, but the rhythm had broken. The chanting, that big tribal call and response that rolls round a stadium in waves, had collapsed into something rougher and higher and more granular. A tone I'd only ever heard a crowd make twice in my entire career. Both times it had been because somebody in the stands had died. And the news had rippled outward through the rows faster than any announcement could ever travel, person leaning to person, until the whole bowl knew without being told. It's a sound a crowd makes when it has stopped being a crowd and started being a great many frightened individuals standing very close together in the dark. There's a texture to it, a scattered, jagged quality, threaded through with single voices breaking out above the mass. It is the worst sound a building like this can make. And it was happening directly over our heads. 20-odd meters of concrete and steel and humanity. And I was standing in a tunnel holding a brick that used to be a radio. "We need to get to a working comm," I said, and the procedures man took the wheel because the procedures man was all I had. The police control box on the north side has its own hardened line. Separate trunk, separate supply, built to survive exactly this kind of failure. If anything in this building is still talking to the outside world, it's that box. "The spine," Priya said. Not a question. She'd done the route in training. The spine. It was the obvious move. The only move, as far as I could see. The ring corridor connected directly to the base of the north stand. And from there, a single protected stairwell ran up into the police liaison box that overlooked the whole north terrace. Maybe 400 meters underground. No crowd to fight through. No chaos. A straight, hardened run beneath the worst of it. I'd walked it 1,000 times in 19 years, in every mood the building had ever been in. I genuinely believed, standing there, that it would take 6 minutes and end with me speaking to a calm voice on a working line. I want to be honest with you about the man I was at that exact moment. Because the man is the heart of this. More than the building, more than the room we were about to find. I was a procedures man, down to the marrow. 19 years had taught me that buildings are safe when people follow the system and dangerous when they don't. And somewhere over those years, I'd let that lesson harden into something closer to faith. I believed the building was fundamentally on my side. I believed that if I knew the corridors and obeyed the protocols and respected the structure would respect me back and let my people out alive. That belief had never once failed me. It was about to. And it would keep failing me all the way down. Because the one scenario I had never considered in 19 years of imagining disasters was a scenario where the system wasn't broken at all. Where it was working exactly as designed, smoothly, faithfully, to the letter. Just not for us. Never for us. We went into the spine. The first 100 meters were ordinary, and that ordinariness is genuinely hard to convey to anyone who wasn't down there with us, because everything looked completely, reassuringly normal. The painted concrete walls, that institutional cream over gray that every service corridor in the country seems to wear. The green safety line on the floor, running dead straight ahead of us. The numbered fire points with their little glass-fronted alarm boxes. The faint smell that the spine always had, old standing water and warm electrical insulation, and the dry chalkiness of aging concrete. Our footsteps, 4 sets, falling out of rhythm and then briefly into it. Priya's torch beam swinging ahead because we'd switched to torches rather than trust the half-lit emergency strips that gave the corridor a sick yellow underwater quality. Davy carrying his tool bag because Davy would carry his tool bag into his own funeral and probably try to fix the coffin handles on the way down. Sam keeping close to my left elbow, which I let him do because the alternative was the boy somewhere alone. In the dark, and I was not going to allow that. Not while I was still standing. It was Priya who stopped first, at the junction we called Point 6, where the spine passed directly beneath the halfway line, the dead center of the pitch and the building both. Gareth. Just my name. She had her torch pointed straight down at the floor and she wasn't moving. The green safety line, the painted one that runs the length of every service corridor in every public building in the country, the one fixed by regulation and inspected every year. The one I had personally signed off on at our last audit, stopped at Point 6. It didn't fade out the way old paint fades, scuffed thin by foot traffic. It had been painted over. A deliberate strip of fresh gray floor coating, maybe 2 years old judging by the fine settled dust on its surface, laid down right across the green line like a censor's bar. And beyond it, the corridor continued. But the floor markings on the far side were entirely different, newer, cleaner, a type of non-slip coating with a faint pebbled texture that we had never specified for any part of the building. And I would know, because in 19 years I had signed off on every coating, every paint, every surface treatment that went down on any floor anyone walked on in that ground. "This isn't ours," I said. My voice came out lower than I meant it to. "What do you mean it isn't ours?" Priya crouched, ran a fingertip along the seam where the old floor met the new. "It's right under our feet. I mean, I never authorized this. Nobody ran it past me. This whole section's been refitted, properly refitted, and there's no paperwork for it anywhere I've ever seen." I knelt beside her and put my own hand flat on the new floor. It was real. Cool, solid, slightly textured under my palm. Recent enough that the coating still had that faint chemical newness to it that you lose after a few years. Someone had done significant structural work in my building, in a corridor that ran directly under the center of the pitch, and had done it without a single document crossing my desk in 19 years. "Davy, did you know about this?" Davy came up beside me and looked at the floor for a long time, longer than the question deserved. And I realized he wasn't looking at the floor. He was looking past it, at the implication of it. "No," he said finally. But I know who would have. Who? He didn't answer right away. He'd raised his torch and was looking up now, at the ceiling, where a run of electrical conduit disappeared into a junction box that was also wrong. Too new, too heavy for the load it would carry, mounted with the kind of care that costs money, on brackets that didn't match anything else in the corridor. There was a small manufacturer's plate riveted to its side that I didn't recognize, no logo I'd ever specified to a contractor. And on the underside of it, a single green LED, lit, steady, patient. That box has power, Davy said quietly. When the entire comms rack 300 meters back is dead, when nothing down here has so much as a dial tone. He let his torch hold on it. Gareth, that box is on a different supply. There's a whole system down here running on something we don't feed and never have. Separate power, separate everything. It survived the cut because it was never on our circuit to begin with. I'll tell you exactly what I felt standing there, because I think it matters more than anything I saw. It wasn't fear, not yet. Not the clean animal kind. It was a specific vertigo. The sensation of discovering that a place you believed you knew completely has a second version of itself folded underneath the version you knew. And that the people who built that second version had done it deliberately, around you, beside you, without ever telling you. In a building you were legally and morally responsible for keeping people alive. Sighed. 19 years. I'd been walking over a stranger's work every single day and calling it mine. We keep moving, I said, because moving was the only procedure I had left that still seemed to function. We get to the north box. We find out what's actually happening up there, and we get those doors open. Everything else waits. We crossed the painted-over line. The far side of point 6 was where the air changed, and I noticed it the instant we stepped over the gray strip. The way you notice walking from a warm room into a cold one. The air on the new side was cooler, drier. It had movement in it. The faint sense of being conditioned by something, pushed and pulled and filtered, not just the dead standing air of an ordinary service corridor. And there was a smell underneath the cold. Faint, chemical, Swedish, in a way that didn't belong to anything mechanical. The smell of a sealed space that's been kept sealed for a long time and breathed its own breath over and over. I knew that smell. It was the smell of the old air raid sections, the welded shut ones, the ones I'd opened exactly once years ago for a survey and never again. Except those were welded shut. Except this corridor, which I had walked 1,000 times in 19 years and could have drawn from memory, was apparently feeding off a system I'd never seen, lit by a box I'd never installed, walked on by a floor I'd never bought. Gareth. Sam, behind me, his voice gone small and careful. There's writing on the wall. There was. Stenciled low at about knee height, where you'd only ever see it if you happened to be crouched down or crawling. Black letters on the gray paint, crisp, official, machine cut. A short sequence, RZ4. Below it, smaller, no personnel during event. And below that, smaller still, added later, in a completely different hand, hurried, scratched on with a white paint pen by someone who was not part of whoever had done the official stenciling. They lock from the wrong side. I read it 3 times. The official line, then the scrawl. They lock from the wrong side. The handwriting was uneven, the kind you get when someone's writing fast and low and frightened, maybe crouched exactly where Sam was crouched now. RZ, Priya said slowly. Restricted zone. Maybe. But RZ4 implied an RZ1, a 2, a 3. It implied a whole numbered hierarchy of restricted zones threaded through a building where I was the single person legally empowered to restrict a zone. I felt the building's second self pressing in around us from all sides now, calm and complete and indifferent. And for the first time, the cold in the corridor stopped feeling like a quirk of the ventilation and started feeling like it had a purpose I'd never been told about and was not part of. We reached the first sealed door at point 8. It was not one of our doors. I knew that before I was within 10 feet of it. Ours were standard fire doors, steel-faced push bar, with a little wired glass window at head height so you could see who was coming the other way. Functional, regulated, familiar. This was something else entirely. Solid. No window, no push bar. A heavy frame set deep into the concrete, the kind of installation you'd put on a bank vault or an industrial freezer, with a fat black rubber gasket running the entire perimeter and a single black handle set at waist height. And mounted beside it, at chest height, a small flush panel with 2 indicator lights, one red, one green. The green was lit. I had never seen this door. Let me be clear about that because it's the thing that still wakes me. The door stood directly across the spine, blocking the only protected route to the north stand, and there had never, in 19 years of walking that exact corridor, been a door at point 8. There had been wall. There had been a length of cream-painted concrete with a fire point on it. Now there was a vault. "It's a positive pressure seal," Davy said. He'd gone close to it, closer than I would have, and held his hand near the bottom edge of the gasket without quite touching it. "Feel that. Come here, feel it. Air's pushing out around the edge, all the way round. There's a steady leak of it under pressure. Whatever's on the other side is being held at a higher pressure than the air on this side." He looked back at me over his shoulder. "You do that when you want to keep something out of a space. Positive pressure means clean air pushing outward so nothing dirty can drift in. Or," and he paused, "you do it when you want to keep something from leaking out of the space, out of the dirty side into the clean. Which is it?" "Won't know that until we open it." He straightened up and looked at me directly, and his face had gone hard and still. "And I'll tell you now, Gareth, I don't think we should open it. I don't think we should touch it." But the north box was on the other side of it. Every protected route I knew, every hardened corridor that led toward a working radio, ran through that door. The unprotected routes climbed up into the public concourses, and the concourses were sealed. 100 magnetic bolts holding home. And the crowd above us was still making that wrong, rising, granular sound. And I had 3 people standing in the dark with me, one of them a child, and 61,000 more over my head, and a dead radio in my hand, and a stencil at my feet that said they lock from the wrong side. I put my hand on the cold black handle. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually sit with it for a moment, because I have sat with it for a very long time. You're underground. The only ways out you know are sealed shut. The single route to a working radio runs through a heavy pressure door that someone built into your building in secret, behind a warning sign that says no personnel during the event. Do you open it, or do you turn around and walk back to the locked exits and wait in the dark for a world that has just deliberately cut you off? Tell me in the comments what you'd have done. Honestly, not what sounds brave. Because I'll tell you what I did. I opened it. The handle turned far more easily than its weight had any right to suggest, smooth and engineered and silent. The seal broke with a soft exhale, the pressurized air sighing out past us all at once, staying that cold chemical sweetness up into our faces. And the door swung inward on a perfectly balanced hinge into a darkness that our 4 torch beams could not find the back of. It wasn't a corridor. It was a room. A long, low room running parallel to the spine, far wider and deeper than the space I knew the building to have in that area, which meant it had been carved out of the old air raid provision and the surrounding structure rearranged, reinforced, hollowed out, and rebuilt around a secret. And down both sides of the room, in two neat, receding rows that vanished past the reach of our light, were bunks. Metal frame bunks. 3 high, military in their plainness. Each one made up with a folded gray blanket, each one stenciled with a number. And between the bunks, set on the floor at regular measured intervals, were sealed crates, heavy-duty, stamped with the same machine-cut lettering as the wall. It was a shelter, a real one, built to hold people, to keep them alive, hidden under the playing surface of a football stadium, behind a vault door, breathing power from a supply that no one had ever told me existed. And it had been used, recently. The blankets weren't decades dusty the way the air raid stores were. There were boot scuffs across the new clean floor, dark smears of use. A white enamel mug sat abandoned on top of one of the crates, a hard brown film of dried coffee glued to the bottom of it. Days old, not years. Somebody had stood in this room and drunk a coffee and put the mug down within the last week, while I sat in my office 2 corridors away, signing off on floor coatings that weren't real. "Somebody's been living down here," Priya whispered. Her torch was moving along the rows of bunks, counting them without meaning to. "Not living," Davy said. He'd walked a little way into the room ahead of us and stopped, gone completely still. His torch pointed at the far end where the beam had finally found a wall. "Working." Because the far wall wasn't a wall. It was a bank of equipment. Server racks, breathing quietly on that same separate, untouchable power, their status lights blinking in steady, patient sequence. A long steel desk. A row of monitors, dark. And above the desk, painted directly onto the concrete in the same crisp, official black stencil as everything else in that place. 4 words that took the building I had given my entire working life to and rearranged it into something I no longer recognized. Brenvale Park Continuity Station. Continuity. It's a word from a very particular world. It's the word governments use for the plans they make to keep functioning after the absolute worst has happened. Continuity of government. Continuity of operations. The quiet, bureaucratic name for the places they build to put the people who matter when the rest of the country can't be saved. And it was stenciled, neat and unhurried, on the wall of a room hidden directly beneath 61,000 entirely ordinary people who had bought tickets to watch a Saturday football match. "Davy." My voice didn't sound like mine. It came out thin. "What is this place?" "I think," he said slowly, not turning round, "it's the place the broadcast was telling people not to exit toward. Do not exit through. I think we just walked straight into the one part of this building that was never, ever meant to open during an event. And I think," he reached out and laid his hand flat on top of the nearest crate, "I think those crates aren't food." He was right about the crates. I'll get to the crates. But first, I need you to understand the timeline, because the timeline is what turned a strange and frightening discovery into a death sentence. And the timeline is the part I got wrong, and getting it wrong is the thing I will answer for until I stop breathing. We'd been underground perhaps 15 minutes. The crowd above had been making the wrong sound for around 10 of those. And in that continuity station, on the long steel desk, among the row of dark monitors, one small screen was not dark. It was set flush into the desktop. An old monochrome readout, the cheap, reliable kind that shows system status in plain green text on a black and nothing else. and it was counting. A line of characters, glowing soft green. Purge cycle RZ4, armed. And below it, a number dropping in real time. 4150, 4149, 4148, 41 minutes and counting down. Davy, I pointed. My hand wasn't quite steady. He came across the room and bent over the desk and read it, and the color went out of his face. Properly out. The blood draining from it the way it does when a man understands something faster than he wants to, when his mouth gets the meaning a half second before his courage can catch up. Purge, he said. He said it very quietly. In a sealed, positive pressure facility, purge means exactly one thing. They flush the air. The whole atmosphere of a contaminated zone gets evacuated, pushed out, and replaced with clean. You do it to decontaminate a space after something's gotten into it. He swallowed. I watched his throat work. RZ4 is this zone, the one we are standing in right now. In 41 minutes, this room flushes its own air. And if that door is sealed when the cycle runs, and it will be, the pressure differential holds it locked until the cycle completes. We would be inside a vacuum room with the doors locked from the wrong side. They lock from the wrong side. The paint pen warning, low on the wall back at point 8. Someone before us had learned the hard way that the doors of this place could not be opened from within once a cycle armed. Someone had bled, or watched someone bleed, and had crouched down with a paint pen and tried to warn whoever came next. Then we go back, Priya said, fast, her words tumbling. We go back the way we came. We don't need this room. It's a horrible room. We go back into the spine and find another route to the north box. There is no other route, I said. Not to the north box, not a protected one. Every hardened corridor I know runs through this room now. The unprotected routes go up into the public concourse, and the concourse is sealed shut behind 100 bolts. We came in here to get to a working radio. The only working anything in this entire building is sitting on that desk, and it's counting down to killing the room it's sitting in. And then the monitors changed. The dark screens above the desk woke up, all of them at once, a soft electronic flicker and then light. And they weren't showing system data. They were showing the stadium, camera feeds, the bowl from high above, the curving sweep of the stands, the bright green rectangle of the pitch under the floodlights, the match cameras rerouted into this hidden room, because of course a continuity station would want eyes on the surface above it, would want to watch the world it had been built to outlive. And on every single screen, 61,000 people were trying to leave a building that had sealed all its doors. I have watched a great many crowds in 19 years. It's most of what the job actually is. I know exactly what a normal egress looks like, the slow, patient shuffle of people who trust without thinking about it that the exits will be there when they reach them, who chat and laugh and check their phones as they file out. This was not that. This was the early, terrible stage of a crush. The stage that has a name and a physics and a body count attached to it. The stage where the people at the very front have realized the doors won't open and have started to push back. And the people behind them, 30,000 deep, don't know yet and are still pressing forward toward the exits. Because forward is what you do. Because the only information any of them has is that everyone in front of them is moving toward the way out. I could see the pressure building against the sealed gates on the south lower. I could see the stewards in their high-vis orange bibs, my stewards, the people I'd trained, trying to wave the crowd back and being absorbed into it, swallowed like swimmers in a tide. I could see on the camera covering the southeast corner exactly the kind of pinch point I had spent 19 years of my professional life designing crowds away from, redesigning, re-signing, drilling stewards to manage. and it was filling. The human density climbing into the red. And there was not one single thing I could do about it from a hidden room beneath their feet. Why are the doors sealed? Priya was right at the screens now, one hand pressed flat over her mouth. Gareth, why would anyone seal the doors during a match? People are going to die up there. People are dying up there right now. Why would the building do that? Why would anyone build it to do that? And that was the moment the speaker on the desk crackled. The single working speaker in a building full of dead ones, and a voice came through it. Calm, recorded. The same flat voice that had been cut off mid-broadcast on the surface, except now I was hearing the part the surface never got. The part that played only down here, only for the room. Containment Protocol Bravan is active. All public egress is sealed by automatic order. Do not exit through the affected zones. Continuity personnel report to RZ4. Surface population is designated non-recoverable. Repeat. Surface population is non-recoverable. Purge will complete in... And then the number, read aloud in that same dead calm recorded voice. Non-recoverable. I have turned that single word over more times than I could ever count. It's a logistics word, a warehouse word. It's the term you use for cargo you've written off, for stock that's been water damaged past saving, for a position on a map you've decided in a planning room to abandon to the enemy. And someone, somewhere, sitting at a desk in a building far from this one, in a plan drawn up years before any of us four had ever set foot in that corridor, had reached for that word and applied it to 61,000 human beings watching a football match on a Saturday afternoon. They had decided, in advance in cold ink, that if a certain thing ever happened, the crowd would be sealed inside, and the only people the doors would ever open for were the continuity personnel hidden in the room I was now standing in, breathing its clean, cold, sweetened air. We weren't trapped by an accident. There was no gas leak with a procedure stapled to it. We were standing inside the safe room of a plan that had just automatically, faithfully, classified everyone above us as an acceptable loss. If you've ever worked a job where you trusted the system because the system had simply never failed you, tell me where you're listening from right now, and tell me honestly whether you'd have kept trusting it standing in that room. Because I want to know I wasn't the only one who'd have believed, right up to that exact second, that somebody competent and decent was in charge of all of it. It's not real, I said. I actually said that out loud. I heard myself say it. It's a drill. It has to be a drill, a test of the override system, a stress test of the seal logic, and the doors are fail-safe. They're built fail-safe. They'll release in a minute. It's not a drill, Gareth. Davy had moved to the crates. He had one of them open, the heavy lid swung back, and he was holding up what was inside. You do not stock a drill with these. Inside, packed neatly in cut gray foam, were respirators. Full face, the proper kind, military grade, with sealed canister filters seated in the cheeks. Rows of them. Dozens. You don't seal real people behind real doors for a drill. And you don't fill the safe room with breathing gear if there's nothing in the air worth breathing through a filter. Gareth. He held the respirator out toward me, an offering and an accusation at once. Containment protocol. Affected zones. They were ready. They were ready for something to get loose inside this building that you breathe. The crowd isn't being sealed in to keep them safe from a fire. The crowd is being sealed in because something up there has already been exposed to something. And this room, this clean, cold room, is exactly where the people who knew about it were always meant to come and wait it out. The smell. The cold, sweet chemical smell I'd blamed on the old air raid section. It wasn't that at all. It was the air in this room being kept deliberately, mechanically clean by a system built to protect the very few while the very many breathed whatever had been let loose above their heads. And the purge cycle, armed, counting down from 41 minutes when we'd found it, less now. Which meant the system believed this room, the clean room, the safe room, had itself become contaminated. By the door we had opened, we had broken the seal, we had let the outside air in, and the building, working exactly as designed, exactly as faithfully as I had always trusted it to work, had registered the breach in its sacred clean space and made its decision, calmly, automatically, to scrub the contamination out the only way it knew how. We had armed the purge ourselves, by walking in, by opening the door I knew I shouldn't open and opened anyway. "How long now?" I said. 39 minutes, Priya said, reading the green text. Her voice had gone flat and careful, the steadiness people find when panic is the only other option. 38. "We can't get out the way we came," Davy said. "I keep telling you, and you keep not hearing it. Once that cycle's armed, the south door behind us is pressure-locked solid. It will not open from this side. They lock from the wrong side. That's what the writing means. That's the whole engineering of the place." "Then there's another door," I said. And I made myself believe it because the alternative was standing still. A facility like this does not have one entrance. It can't. Think about it. Where do the continuity personnel come from when they're called? They don't come strolling down the spine past my office in front of the cleaning staff. They have their own way in, their own access. "Davy, find me the second door. Priya, get the layout off those screens, switch through the cameras. I want to know what's happening to that crowd, minute by minute." "Sam." The boy wasn't there. I'd let him stay close to my left elbow the whole way down. And I had taken my eyes off him for 90 seconds, maybe less, while the world rearranged itself. And now he wasn't at my elbow. The respirator crate stood open where Davy had left it. A child, alone, in a sealed room full of breathing equipment with a countdown running on the desk, and I had looked away. The one thing I'd promised myself I wouldn't do. "Sam." "Here." His voice came back small, from the far dark end of the room, past the server racks, somewhere my torch hadn't reached yet. "Mr. Hollis, there's a door back here, but—" A pause that lasted too long. "There's a person." I went fast, and the room was longer than it had any architectural right to be. The bunks sliding past in my torchlight, and at the very back, past the last 3-high frame, set into the rear wall, was a second door, the continuity entrance. Narrower than the first, but built to the same standard, the same heavy frame, the same fat rubber gasket. And slumped against the foot of it, half sitting in the dark, was a man in a gray coverall with a small embroidered crest on the breast pocket. The Brevin crest, I'd learn later. He was alive. Just. His full-face respirator was half on, the strap caught, the mask hanging loose off one cheek so that one eye looked out clear and the other was hidden behind fogged plastic. And there was a dark stain spreading out from underneath him, slow and wide, across the clean new floor. He had been trying to get out, and the door had refused him. And he had hurt himself very badly doing it, hands and shoulder and more. And from the wet, shallow way he was breathing, I understood two things at once. That he was one of the continuity personnel, the people the plan had been built to save. And that whatever this place was supposed to protect him from, the protection had already failed him completely. He turned his head, slow, and his one clear eye found me and focused with an effort that cost him. "You open the south door," he said. His voice was a dry rasp. It wasn't a question. "You armed it." I didn't know, I started. Nobody knows. He laughed, or tried to, and it folded into a wet cough that bent him forward over the spreading stain. That's the whole design. That's the genius of it. Nobody's supposed to know it's here. His free hand moved, slow and weak, gesturing at the room, the bunks, the desk, the counting number. The crowd's at... He had to stop, breathe, start again. The crowd's a buffer. You put the station under a crowd because nobody on Earth ever looks under a crowd. 60,000 bodies of cover. When it triggers, the crowd seals in and absorbs all the attention. The emergency services, the news cameras, the inquiries, everyone, every single eye, looks at the disaster on the surface. Nobody looks for the room underneath the disaster. We were supposed to be down here, clean and quiet and alive, while the whole world looked the wrong way. What triggered it? Davy had come up beside me, crouching down level with the man. What got into the building? What's in the air? The man's clear eye drifted, lost focus, came back. Doesn't matter now. Aerosol, slow acting. It's already up there. Has been in the bowl since before kickoff, drifting through the whole crowd. It just needed the seal order to keep it contained inside the bowl instead of spreading. He focused on me again. And there was a terrible clarity in him now, the lucidity that sometimes comes right at the end. But the seal's only any good if the station stays clean. That's the catch. You broke the clean room. The system can't tell your air from the surface air anymore. It just knows the seal's compromised. So it'll purge. It'll flush this entire zone and reset itself to clean. And it does not care. It cannot care that we're standing inside it when it does. The plan was never to save people, son. Get that into your head. The plan was always to save the room. The safest place in the entire building, built to outlast every soul above us. And it would kill the four of us without a flicker of anything, because it had never been built to save anyone. It had been built to preserve a capability, a function, a thing. And we were simply contamination standing in the way of the function continuing. I looked at the number on the desk. It was distant from here, a green smear at the far end of the room, but I could read it. 36 minutes. I looked at the second door, the continuity door, the one the dying man had thrown himself against until he bled. Can it be opened? I asked him. That door, before the purge runs, can it be opened from in here? From in here? He shook his head, just barely, a fraction of movement. Once it's armed. No, that's the entire point of the design. You can't compromise a clean room from the inside. The doors hold until the cycle completes and the air's been fully replaced. Both of them. His head went back against the steel of the door he'd failed to open. I've been trying for 2 hours, son. Long before you ever got here. That's not blood from a fight. He looked down at the spreading stain, almost with detachment. That's from the door? And there it was, laid out whole, the trap in its full design. 2 pressure doors, both locked the wrong way round, both holding fast until a purge cycle completed by flushing every molecule of air out of the room we stood in and replacing it with clean. A countdown we had started ourselves by walking through the first door. A child, 2 of my staff, a dying stranger, and me, sealed inside a tomb that the people who designed it had the gall to call a station. Except Davy had gone very quiet. And Davy going quiet was Davy thinking. And I had learned over 20 years of working beside the man that when he went quiet, you shut your mouth and you waited. Because something was turning over behind his eyes. The purge has to vent somewhere, he said. The dying man's clear eye opened. Think about it, Davy went on. Faster now. The engineer climbing up out of the fear, the part of him that had spent a lifetime understanding how things actually worked, taking the controls back from the part that was afraid. He said it flushes the air out and replaces it. You can't replace the air in a sealed box. It's physics. If you push old air out, something has to pull new air in, and the old air has to go somewhere. There has to be an exhaust, a vent, a duct. Somewhere this room dumps its old atmosphere when it purges, and somewhere separate it draws the clean replacement from. Find me the exhaust. He was already turning, his torch up, sweeping the ceiling, the high corners, the dark seam where the back wall met the floor behind the server racks. Find me the exhaust, and I'll find you a way out the system never thought to lock, because nobody on Earth armors an air vent against people. They armor doors against people. They armor vents against weather and birds. A vent's a hole in the wall that they forgot to be afraid of. He was moving along the back wall, torch hunting, and I went with him because it was the only thread we had left to pull. Priya stayed up near the front of the room with the boy and the dying man, her torch steady on the crates so the kid wouldn't be in the dark. And the number on the desk kept dropping, green digit by green digit. And on the silent screens above it, the crowd kept pressing against the gates that would never open for them. And I understood with a cold and total clarity that whatever the four of us managed to do in the next 35 minutes, a great many of those people up there were already lost. And that there was nothing at all, that the head of stadium safety could do to change it. That was the thing that broke something in me. Not the danger to us, not the counting number. It was the screens. 19 years of designing safe egress, of standing in cold concourses at 6 in the morning, timing how long it took to empty a stand, of believing with my whole chest that if I did my job carefully enough, the building would let people out when it mattered. And the building had carried a deeper instruction the whole time, written and signed before I was ever hired. And that instruction was simple and complete and unspeakable. Let them die quietly, so the room can live. Davy found the exhaust behind the third server rack from the end. There was no point number on it, because the facility didn't use my numbers, didn't acknowledge my map of the world at all. A grill set low in the back wall, maybe 60 centimeters square, painted the same gray as everything else, easy to miss. He got his fingers into the louvers and felt behind it. Damper, he said. Heavy one. Shut right now. Is that it? That's it. He had his face close to the grill, reading it the way he read everything, by touch and instinct and 40 years of his hands. When the purge fires, this damper opens, and the whole room dumps its air through here under pressure. It has to go up and out. You can't dump a contaminated atmosphere sideways into the rest of the building. You'd just be moving the problem. It vents to open air, probably straight up through a stack on the roof, dressed up to look like an ordinary ventilation cowl so nobody asks what it's really for. He sat back on his heels and looked at me. If I can get this grill off and jam that damper open and brace it before the cycle runs, we go up the exhaust. It's a climb, a bad one, by the angle of that ducting. It'll be tight, properly tight. But it is not a door, and the system is not watching it as a door. It's just a hole it expects to push air through. 31 minutes. Here is the cost. And here is the part I have to tell you absolutely straight, because I've never once told it straight to anyone in all the years since. Not in the inquiry, not to my wife, not to myself in the small hours. The vent was small. Davy measured it with his hands and his eyes and his decades of knowing the inside of ducks. And he said it plainly, the way he said everything, with no cushioning on it at all. 4 people, maybe, if they're quick and lucky and the duck doesn't pinch above the first bend. not 5. The dying man could not climb. He could barely lift his own hand off the floor. And every minute we spent trying to move him, to drag him, to somehow haul a broken man up a near vertical steel chimney, was a minute gone off a countdown that would not negotiate. And the duct would only take so many bodies before the cycle fired and turned the thing we were climbing through into the exact thing it had been built to be. The man knew it before I let myself know it. They always know it first, the ones it's actually about. "Leave me," he said. The words came out level. He'd had 2 hours alone against that door to arrive at them. "I'm not..." He stopped to breathe. "I'm not recoverable. You understand the word now. You've heard it. It means me too. I'm not leaving anyone." I said it fast, and I meant it, and it didn't matter that I meant it. "You already left 60,000. He said it without cruelty, without even much weight, just as a flat fact laid down between us. The last clear, true thing a clear man had it in him to give me. "You can't carry me up a chimney, son. And if you try, you'll burn the time, and the boy dies with me. So do the math. Do the math you spent your whole life doing. You're the safety man. You know exactly how this kind of math works. You've done it on paper 100 times. This is just the once it has a face." I did know. That was the unbearable center of it. I had run that exact calculation 100 times, more, in planning meetings and risk assessments and capacity reviews. In the clean, bloodless language of flow rates and acceptable risk and maximum safe occupancy. Acceptable risk. The phrase that lets a safety man sleep at night. The phrase that means somebody, somewhere, in some number on a spreadsheet is being quietly written off so the larger number can be protected. And now the phrase had a face, breathing wet and shallow in front of me on a clean floor going dark with his blood. And that face was looking up at me and instructing me, gently, to apply the calculation to him. "I want to ask you the hardest one, and I'll understand completely if you don't want to answer it, if you'd rather not even think it through. If you could save 4 for certain, or risk all 5 and most likely save none, and one of the 5 was already dying and was looking you in the eye and telling you to go, what do you do?" I have heard every clean version of that answer in 19 years of training rooms full of people who were sure of themselves. I had never once heard the version that comes out of your own mouth when the floor is wet and the number is dropping and the dying man knows your job better than your conscience does. I told Priya to take the boy and go first. Davy would lead. He knew duct work. He'd jam the damper and brace it and find the turns in the dark. Priya behind him with Sam tucked between them. The boy small enough that the duct might almost be kind to him. I would come last and seal nothing behind me because there was nothing left to seal. The man caught my sleeve as I knelt down to him one more time. His grip was almost nothing, the strength gone out of his fingers, just the memory of a hand closing. "There's a third thing," he said. "You need to know it, or it happens again somewhere else. The trigger." His clear eye held mine and would not let it go. "It's not automatic from the contamination. The seal doesn't just fire itself off a sensor. Someone has to authorize it. Someone has to give the order. Someone watched that crowd, knew exactly what was drifting through the air up there, and pressed the order that locked them all in." He breathed. That voice on the broadcast, that cut-off voice, that was the order being given, live, the moment it went out. And the cut-off, the clean snip mid-word, that wasn't a malfunction either. They cut their own broadcast the instant the order went out, deliberately, so that nobody upstairs, no manager, no police commander, nobody with a conscience and a microphone could countermand it before the bolts dropped. There's a person, son. There's always a person at the end of it. The room doesn't decide. People decide, and then they hide behind the room, and they call the decision protocol. 26 minutes. Where? I said. Where do they give the order from? Where's the person? North box. Something crossed his ruined face that might once have been a smile. Your police liaison box, the one you were trying to get to all along. That's the override station. That's where the order comes from, and that's the only place it can be lifted. He coughed. It was never a police box. It just looks like one, so that no copper ever wonders what's really wired into it. The same panel that gave the seal order can lift it. Manual override. Throw it, and the doors open. Every door. The crowd gets out. But somebody has to choose to throw it. And the somebody who's sitting up there right now chose not to, and is choosing not to every second we're talking. The whole shape of it landed on me at once, complete and perfect and obscene. The way out was the way toward the room where a human being had decided that 61,000 people were non-recoverable. To save my own life and the lives of the three with me, I had to climb a chimney that the building itself wanted to fire. And to save the crowd, the ones still standing, I had to reach the very station that had condemned them, find whoever was sitting calmly at its panel, and make them lift the order they'd given. The vent didn't just lead away from the trap. It led, by the only route there was, straight up toward the hand that had set it. Go, I said to Davy. He went into the vent. I heard him grunt at the first bend, the deep, involuntary sound of a big man folding himself through a space that didn't want him. I heard the scrape and clang of his wrench getting purchase on the damper, the grind of it jamming open, his breath echoing tinny in the steel. Then his voice, distorted and flat, calling back down that the way was clear above, tight but climbable, that it went up steep and then turned, and that a long, long way up there was a square of gray daylight. Then Sam, who went into the dark hole without a word, just one quick look back at me, and the duct swallowed him with room to spare. Then Priya, who paused at the mouth of it with her torch in her teeth and looked back at me, and there was a question on her face that I did not have the time and did not have the right to answer. I knelt to the man one final time. He was a long way off now, his clear eye gone soft and unfocused, the wet sound of his breathing slowing. "What's your name?" I asked him. It seemed, suddenly, like the only important thing left to do for him, that he not go out of the world as a gray coverall and an embroidered crest and a function that had failed. "Ackroyd," he said. The word came out on almost no air at all. "Tell them?" But he didn't finish it. Whatever he wanted told, it went where the rest of him was going. His eye settled on a point in the middle distance, on nothing, and stayed there. And the number on the far desk read 22 minutes. And I left a man named Ackroyd to be flushed out of a clean room by a system that had never, for one instant, intended to save him. And I climbed into the vent. I'll tell you about the climb the way I actually remember it, which is in pieces, jagged and out of order, because the body protects you from some things by refusing to let you keep them whole. The duct was steel, riveted, cold enough that my palm stuck to it slightly, and it climbed at an angle that turned my forearms to fire inside the first 3 meters. There were internal stiffeners running across it, structural ribs, and you hauled yourself up them rib to rib like the rungs of a ladder built by a man who hated the people who'd use it. The air in the duct was the cold, sweet chemical air, the clean room air, and I tried not to think about what breathing it meant. Tried not to think about whether the thing that had made the crowd non-recoverable was already in my lungs, drawn in through a face that wore no respirator, because the respirators had been a child's size now, and Priya's and wedged useless in the bottom of Davy's bag. And there had not been time. And there is never the time the plan assumes there will be. That's the whole lesson of it, if there is one. The plan always assumes a calm that does not exist when the moment comes. Ahead of me and above me, I could hear the others, and the sounds of them were the only thing holding me to the right side of panic. Davy's steady, muttered cursing, low and continuous, the most comforting noise in the entire world. Sam breathing hard but even, not panicking, a far tougher boy than 14 had any business being. Priya, quiet, the same quiet she carried on the surface, just doing the next thing in front of her, and then the thing after that. The first bend nearly finished me. The duct kinked sharply where it cleared a structural beam, and you had to fold yourself sideways through a gap that a larger man simply would not have made. And for one long moment, wedged at the angle with my own body weight pinning my chest against cold steel, I understood with absolute and peaceful clarity that this was the place I was going to die. That in 50 years, when they finally pulled the ground down, they'd find me sealed in a wall, a skeleton in a chimney with no story attached to it, a mystery for some future demolition crew. And then, Priya's hand was there, reaching back down through the bend. And she didn't say anything brave or stupid. She didn't waste a breath. She just got 2 fingers hooked into the collar of my jacket and pulled while I pushed, the 2 of us working against the steel in the angle. And I came through the kink with a long strip of skin left behind on a rivet and kept climbing. We passed a second damper. Davy jammed it open and braced it. We passed a junction where the duct split into 2, and Davy, somehow, in the pitch dark, in the cold, with the clock running in all our heads, knew without hesitating to take the branch that climbed. And I did not ask him how he knew. I just followed him, because following Davy had kept me alive, longer and more reliably than any procedure I had ever written down. And then the light. Gray, weak, ordinary English daylight. The most unremarkable light there is, leaking down through a set of angled louvers in a structure on the roof, the stack, dressed up as a ventilation cowl, exactly as Aykroyd had said it would be, hiding in plain sight on a roof line full of cowls and aerials and lightning rods. Davy had the louver panel off before I even reached him, wrenched it loose and pushed it clear. And one by one, we spilled out of the duct onto the flat roof of the north stand, into open air, into a cold wind off the city, into the enormous low-gray sky. And below us, 400 meters of stadium and 61,000 human beings. The first thing I did was breathe properly, deep, and then hate myself for how good the open air felt going in. The second thing I did was look down over the parapet, and what I saw down there I will carry to the end of my life. The crowd was still inside. From the roof of the north stand you could see the entire bowl laid out below you like an architect's model, and the bowl was full. And at every exit, the dark, dense mass of people had stopped moving the way water stops moving when it hits a dam, piling up against itself, going still and solid where it should have been flowing free. The doors had held. The seal had held. The plan had held perfectly. And I could see the small, bright orange specks of my stewards, my people, the ones I'd trained and signed off and sent up there that morning, still working the crowd, still trying, doing exactly what I'd taught them to do. And not one of them knowing that the building had been instructed to keep everyone inside on purpose, by a person in a room 400 meters away. 20 minutes maybe, on the surface, since the broadcast cut off. It takes longer than people imagine for a crush to become the worst thing it is capable of becoming. There was still time. There was still, barely by a thread, time. The north box was below us, and away to the left. A glass-fronted room cantilevered out over the terrace, the one everybody on the staff had always casually assumed was a police observation post. From up on the roof, you could see down into it through the angled glass of its front. And there was a man inside it. One man, gray coverall, the Brevin crest on his breast, sitting at a console, perfectly calm, perfectly still, watching the crowd he had sealed in below him, and doing nothing, because doing nothing was the order, and the order was the entire point of him being there. "That's the panel," I said. "Davy." "Aykroyd said the seal can be lifted from that panel. Manual override. If I get in there." "You don't know how to work it," Davy said. He was at my shoulder, looking down at the same glass box. "He'll work it." I was already moving toward the roof access hatch, the maintenance one, the one I did know, the one that was genuinely mine, that led down into the back service stair of the north stand. "Or he'll tell me how to work it, or I'll make him work it. Stay here with Sam. Get him visible, wave something, your jacket, anything. The air ambulance and the police helicopter both monitor the roofs of grounds like this. Somebody's coming. Make sure they see a kid. Priya, you're with me." "Gareth." Davy caught my arm, his grip hard. "There were respirators down there for a reason. We just climbed out of a duct full of contaminated air. Whatever's in that bowl." "Then I'm already breathing it," I said. "We all are. And so is every single one of those people down there. And they didn't open a door they shouldn't have, Davy. They just bought a ticket to the football. I am not going to stand on a roof and watch this happen through a parapet." I pulled my arm free, gently, because he was right, and we both knew he was right, and it changed nothing. "You've kept us alive this whole way down. Now keep him alive." I meant the boy. "I'll go and open the doors." Here is what I believed, climbing down the dark service stair into the back of the north stand, my own footsteps loud and familiar on concrete that was actually mine. I believed I would reach the box. I believed I would reach the man. I believed there would be a panel with a button or a key or a sequence, and that the simple act of forcing the man's hand to lift the seal would be just that. Simple, once I was standing over him. That belief was the very last piece of the old me, the procedures man. The one who'd spent his whole life trusting that systems have clean-off switches and that the right person pressing the right thing makes the bad thing stop. I should have learned better by then. The building had been teaching me all afternoon. It had one more lesson left. The box had a door, and the door had a lock. And the lock was the only standard, ordinary, club-issue lock in the entire hidden system, because the room had to look like an ordinary police box to ordinary people. And an ordinary police box has an ordinary lock. And I, the head of stadium safety, carried a master key to every ordinary lock in that building on the steel ring at my belt. They armor doors against people. They build vault seals and pressure differentials and purge cycles. And then they forget the one door that has to look normal, because looking normal is its only job. And they fit it with a lock that the safety man's master key has opened 10,000 times. I opened it. The man turned in his chair, unhurried, no surprise on his face at all, and looked at me the way you'd look at weather coming in over a hill. Something you note and do not argue with. "You're not personnel," he said. "I'm the safety officer." I came into the box. Priya stayed in the doorway behind me, blocking it, her torch off now in the gray daylight. Something flickered across his face, the first genuinely human thing I'd seen on it. "There isn't supposed to be a safety officer down here," he said, almost to himself. "The whole design assumes." "I know about the design," I said. "I met Aykroyd. He's dead, or close enough to it, in the room the rest of you left him to bleed out in. I took another step in. On the console in front of him spread a wide panel of switches and dials, and among the 100 of them, set apart on its own, under a hinged, clear plastic guard, was a single switch, and it was lit red. I didn't need him to tell me which one it was. Everything else on that console was function. That one was decision. Lift the seal. I can't do that, he said. You can. Aykroyd told me you can. Manual override, that panel, that switch under the guard. Throw it and the door's open. So throw it. Can isn't the issue. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't moved from the chair. He was a man of perhaps 60, ordinary, gray, tired in a way that went all the way down. The kind of man you would pass on a train platform 1,000 times and never once look at twice. And that was the most frightening thing about him by a long way, because the worst orders in human history are not given by monsters with terrible faces. They're given by tired, ordinary men, reading carefully from a plan that somebody else wrote. The agent is in the bowl, he went on, evenly. It's aerosolized. It's settled into 60,000 people's hair and clothes and lungs. If I lift that seal right now, every one of them who can still walk gets up and walks out through those gates and into the city, carrying it, on their coats, on their hands. In every breath they exhale onto the next person at the bus stop, the train, the front door at home. The containment isn't cruelty, officer. The containment is the only thing standing between this one stadium and the whole city behind it. That is the actual math. You came up here to talk to me about saving people. I'm saving more people than you are physically capable of counting by keeping that door shut. And there it was. The center of everything I thought I had understood, turned over one final, sickening time. Aykroyd had told me there was always a person, and that the person hid behind the room. But the man in front of me wasn't hiding behind anything. He was sitting in plain sight, doing the most monstrous arithmetic I had ever heard a human being speak out loud. And the truly unbearable part, the part that stopped my hand halfway to the guarded switch, was that he might be entirely right. Then there's a treatment, I said. My voice had gone unsteady and I hated it. A decontamination protocol. You don't seal living people in to die. You seal them in to process them. You bring in teams. You wash them down. There is no team coming for live agent, he said. And he said it gently, which made it worse than any shout could have been. Look at your own screens. Look at the surface below you. Do you honestly think that if there were a way to save those people with the resources we actually have, in the time we actually have, that I would be sitting up here in this chair watching it instead of doing it? The agent acts faster than any decon team on Earth could deploy and process 60,000 exposed people. The exposed are already lost. They were lost before I gave the order. Sealing the bowl is what stops one lost stadium from becoming one lost city. It isn't a plan to murder a crowd. It's a plan to lose a stadium instead of a country. I did not write it. He looked at me directly, and his tired eyes were wet now. But I am the one who happens to be here. So I am the one who gives the order. And I gave it. And God help me, I would give it again. There was a clock on his console, not the purge clock that was below us. That was Aykroyd's tomb counting itself down. A different one, a separate counter ticking down in amber. And I asked him what it was. Dispersal failsafe, he said. The agent isn't stable in confinement. It's the one mercy in the whole filthy design. If the seal holds for 60 minutes, if the bowl stays closed and unventilated, The agent in the trapped air breaks down. It degrades. It becomes inert. Trap it long enough in a sealed space and it dies on its own. That's the entire protocol, the only reason any of it works. Hold the seal 1 full hour and the bowl becomes safe again, for whoever in it is still alive. Lift it before then, and you release a live, active agent into open air with a city wind behind it. He glanced down at the amber number. 43 minutes held. 17 left on the original count. 12 on the safety margin. 12 minutes, officer. And the air in that bowl is no longer a danger to a single soul outside it. 12. Open those doors now, and you trade the people in this one stadium for 10, 20 times their number, downwind, over the next week. I looked at the screens that lined the box. The same feeds as the room below, the bowl from every angle. The crush at the south gates had gone past the early stage. It had gone past the stage with a name and into the stage that doesn't get described in training, only in inquiries, afterward, in careful, passive language. I will not describe to you what I saw down there. I'll only tell you that I had spent 19 years of my one life preventing exactly that image from ever existing, and that I was now watching it form in real time on a screen in my own building. And a tired, ordinary man beside me was explaining, not unkindly, why letting it finish was the merciful thing to do. Here is the decision. Here is the one I have to go on living inside every day for the rest of it. If I threw the switch and opened the doors, the people still on their feet, and there were thousands still on their feet, thousands up in the high tiers and out at the quieter gates, who could still turn and walk out under their own power. Those people would live through the next 10 minutes. The ones already caught in the crush were lost either way. Switch or no switch, the physics had them. But every single one who walked out alive would carry an invisible thing into a living city of 1 million people. And the man swore on his tired soul that the math came out worse, far worse, and that 12 minutes more of holding would make the trapped air safe and let the doors open clean. If I held, if I did nothing, if I left the seal standing for 12 more minutes, then the crush at the gates would go on killing people I could see, people I could save right now with one motion of my hand, while I stood there and waited for an amber number to tick down to 0 on the word of the man who had built the trap and sprung it. Save the few I could see, certainly, and maybe doom the many I couldn't. Or sacrifice the few in front of me on the unverifiable word of the man who'd condemn them, for the sake of the many I would never meet. The safety man's math. He'd been right that I knew exactly how it worked. He had been wrong that knowing how it worked made it possible to bear. I want you to tell me, honestly, in the comments, with everything I've laid out in front of you, the agent, the wind, the city, the 12 minutes, the screens. Did I get it right? Because I've never once been sure, not for a single day since, and a long time ago I stopped pretending to myself that I ever would be. I didn't open the doors. I held. God forgive me, and I don't ask him to. But I held. I stood in that glass box with my hand a foot from the guarded switch, close enough to feel the red light warm on my knuckles, and I watched the amber clock, and I made the same arithmetic he had made, the very same calculation I'd spent my entire career hiding behind, in cleaner, gentler, more professional words. And I let 12 minutes happen. 12 minutes is not a long time. You wait longer than that for a kettle and a bus. 12 minutes is also the longest thing that has ever existed, or ever will. I watched the screens, and I made myself keep watching them, because I had decided that if I was going to spend human lives on the promise of a number, I would at the very least not have the cowardice to look away from what the number cost while it was being paid. Priya stood beside me through all of it, in the doorway, and she watched too. And she did not tell me I was right, and she did not tell me I was wrong. She didn't say a single word. And I have always loved her. A little, in a way that has nothing to do with anything but this, for that silence. Because there was no right thing to say in that box. And she was wise enough and kind enough not to invent one and hand it to me as a comfort I hadn't earned. The man at the console did something then that I had not expected. At around the 8-minute mark, he reached across to a second panel and began, quietly, methodically, to work a sequence of switches and a single dial. And I tensed, my hand jumping toward the override. And he said without looking up at me, "Decon staging, I'm bringing it up. When the agent breaks down and the failsafe clears, the gates aren't just going to spring open onto the street. They'll open into a controlled corridor, and the surface teams I called the moment the failsafe armed will be standing in it. They wouldn't come for a stadium full of live agent. Nobody would. But they'll come the second the air reads safe. There is a difference," he said. And now he did look at me. Between letting people die and getting the survivors out through the only door that doesn't kill the city. I made the call 20 minutes ago. They're already in position behind the perimeter. I'm not the thing you think I am, officer. I'm the thing the plan needed somebody to be. And somebody was always going to be it. And today it was me. There's a difference between those two things. It's the only thing I've got left to stand on. I don't know if I believed him. I have never been able to decide. I think, standing in that box with the clock running down, I needed to believe him more than I have ever needed to believe anything. And I have spent years trying to work out whether that need made it true or only made me weak. At 0, the amber number, the fail-safe cleared. A light on the console went from amber to green, and he lifted the seal himself. He reached out and flipped the guard back and threw the switch with his own tired hand. And I did not have to make him do it in the end. And I have thought a very great deal about whether that matters, whether it lets me off anything. And I've concluded that it doesn't, but I tell you anyway, because it's true. The magnetic bolts released across the whole bowl in the same enormous coordinated breath I had heard them lock with at the start. That single held breath finally let go. And on the screens the gates gave way, and the living poured out. Far more living than I had let myself hope for. Out into a controlled perimeter where, exactly as he had said, vehicles and figures in white suits were already waiting, already moving, already doing the patient, terrible work of getting people clear and getting people clean. Not all of them. You understand that. You've understood it for a while now. The crush had taken what it took, in the 12 minutes I held and the 20 before I ever reached the box. And those losses have a place in a public record and a coroner's careful language. And they have an entirely different place in me. And I keep them in the second place. And I will keep them there for as long as I have a mind to keep anything in. But the bowl emptied. The city behind it stood. The agent, whatever it was, and I have never been told, and have stopped asking, died in the dark of the sealed air where they trapped it, breaking itself down to nothing in the place it had been engineered to be defeated. The man's name was never given anywhere I could find. He stayed in the box. When the white suits came up to it, he was still sitting in his chair, and I was led away before I saw what they did with him or for him. And there is no continuity station marked on any plan or drawing or as-built of Brenvale Park that anyone will ever admit exists. The spine was refitted within the month, quietly, by a contractor I never met. The painted-over green line was repainted green, fresh in regulation and correct. Point 8 has an ordinary fire door again now. Steel-faced, push bar, with a little wired glass window you can see through. And I've stood in front of it since and held my hand near the bottom edge of it, the way Davy did. And there's no pressure pushing out around the gasket anymore. No clean, cold, sweet air sighing through. And I genuinely do not know whether that means the room is gone, decommissioned, filled in, or only that they have gotten better at hiding the breath of it from a man who knows to check. Davy kept Sam alive on the roof. The police helicopter saw the boy waving Davy's jacket over the parapet, a small figure and a big man in the wind, and came in low. And that's a separate small mercy I hold on to on the days when the larger account is too heavy. Sam went home to his family. I never saw him again, and I think that's right. I think a boy should be allowed to put a thing like that down and walk away from the man who was holding the door when it happened. Priya left the industry inside the year, and I have never once blamed her, and we still speak now and then. And we have never, not one single time, spoken about the box. Davy retired not long after. He told me once, over a pint in a quiet corner that he barely touched, that the thing which haunted him wasn't the climb, or the dark, or even Ackroyd bleeding out against that door. It was that the system had worked. It did exactly what it was built to do, Gareth, he said, turning the glass slowly on the table and not drinking from it. Start to finish. Nothing failed. Not one bolt, not one seal, not one line of it. That's the part. We spend our whole lives terrified of things failing. Nobody ever sat me down and warned me about a thing working perfectly toward an end I was never told about. That's the part I can't put down. That's the part I'll take with me. I think about that more than I think about anything else from that day. We are trained, all of us, our whole working lives, to fear the system failing. The crack in the support, the dead battery, the stuck door. Nobody trains you for the system working flawlessly, faithfully, beautifully, toward an end that someone decided on years before you ever showed up to work. Nobody trains you for the discovery that the safest, strongest, most carefully engineered place in the whole building was built to save a function and not a single human soul. And that you had been walking over it every morning for 19 years, signing forms about floor coatings, believing all the while that the concrete under your feet was on your side. The concrete was never on anybody's side. It was just doing precisely what it had been told to do by people who had decided, long before any of us arrived, and long after any of us are gone, who exactly was recoverable and who exactly was not. I left the job. They offered me a quiet exit with a generous package and a very good reference and a clear, unwritten, perfectly understood arrangement about what would happen to all of it if I ever described a room that does not exist. I took the exit. I did not take the silence, obviously, or you would not be hearing my voice right now. And I've changed enough of the details that they would have a hard job proving any of it was ever real. And that's the deal I have made with myself in the dark. That the warning matters more than the proof. That getting the shape of it into the world matters more than being believed about the specifics. Because here is the one thing I most need you to take away from all of this. The single piece of it I'm sure about. After all the pieces, I'm not. They lock from the wrong side. Somebody scratched that low on a wall with a white paint pen. Somebody who'd been down there before me. Somebody who had worked it out the hard way and decided, with whatever time they had, to spend some of it warning a stranger they would never meet. That's all most of us are ever going to get when it comes down to it. A stranger's warning, scratched low on a wall, in a building full of doors we have all been told are there to keep us safe. I never found out who wrote it. But every single time, I walk into a large building now, a stadium, a station, an arena, an airport, anywhere they pack the many together and tell them gently, over a clean recorded announcement, that the system has their safety well in hand, I find the service door. I make a point of it. And I look at it, and I think about which side the lock is really on. And I would tell you to do the same, except I know exactly how that sounds. And I know that most of you, sensibly, will hear all of this as a story and nothing more. And maybe that is the safest way to hear it. And maybe I even hope you do. Just remember the number, if you remember nothing else. 61,000 people sat down on a Saturday afternoon to watch a football match. And underneath them, the whole time, was a room built on the calm, written down, carefully filed assumption that if it ever came to it, every one of them was the buffer. The cover, the acceptable loss that kept anyone from ever thinking to look at what was hidden underneath. I was the safety officer. I'd have told you that morning, with complete sincerity, over a cup of tea, that I knew everything there was worth knowing about keeping people alive in that building. I'd have believed it too. I didn't know the first thing. I know it now. And I will be hearing those magnetic bolts drop home all at once. That one enormous held breath finally taken and not let go, for the rest of whatever the system decides to let me have. That's where I'll leave it tonight. Stay safe out there. Find the service door, look at the lock. And if a story like this is the kind of thing that stays with you after the screen goes dark, then you already know where to find the rest of them. I'll be here. The doors on this channel, at least, open from the inside.